Hello and welcome to another edition of Spiritual Awakening Ministry. My name is Rob Baker, Senior Evangelist. We want to thank you for taking your time to review more information about end time and biblical prophecies. As you know, we're continuing on our series called The Historical Overview and the Importance of Israel, Part 8. This is a multi-series to explain how the nation of Israel is in fact very relevant not only to the faith and the foundation of the Christian faith, but also end time scenarios. In other words, Israel being literally God's time clock for end times events. But when we talk about a lot of our laws, things that we have in what's known as the Ten Commandments, a lot of the laws that are even recognized today, a lot of the rituals that are recognized today, both in Judaism and in Christianity, once again, all come from one source, and that goes through not only Jesus, but all the way back to even Abraham. So today we're going to once again go through our series, which I believe is really important, especially in this time. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit more about prophecy in the news. Each week, we like to share with you some of the things that the Bible talks about to be looking for as signs of the last days. And in the Bible, it says once again in 2 Timothy 3:1-3, in the last days, men shall be without natural affection. And it's really important to understand what natural affection really means. Natural affection is not only affection towards, let's say hypothetically, the individuals that you care about, like your family members, children, parents, grandparents, relatives, but also how we treat other people. Here's an interesting couple of articles that have happened since the last time we actually had our last sermon training. We have here a Tennessee woman, 90 years old, points a gun and threatens to kill a neighbor over leaves in the yard. A homeless man accused of killing a decorated college golfer and wrote a letter saying he wants to plead guilty. Here's another loss of natural affection. A New Hampshire shooting leaves 2 dead, 11-year-old boy reportedly in custody. Understand what we're talking about right here. An 11-year-old boy did not have the sense to understand the evilness of killing their elders. And here you have a situation to where, once again, we have a failed society going into secularism, removing God out of the schools, leaving the heart of the children to have this mindset that they come from an evolutionary system that has no accountability by God. In other words, we come from the goo to the zoo to you. We live like dogs and we die like dogs, and that's it. There's nothing after death. So this young child was never brought up in the ways of the Lord. And if this child would have been brought up in the ways of the Lord, more than likely this wouldn't have happened. Here's another situation where not only this country is dealing with our own citizens, children, causing such turmoil and loss of natural affection, we're actually importing it into our country. Here's an article that shows a community struggles to cope after killings that authorities have linked to illegal immigration. Yes, we have crimes here in the United States. Yes, American citizens kill other American citizens and family members. But this isn't just something that's happening in the United States. This is something that happens all over the world. And now we're doing everything we can to import this type of criminal activity. Here's another one for loss of natural affection. A Minnesota mom allegedly kills 2 children, then herself. Once again, here is a mother that's supposed to protect her children, bring her kids up in the ways of the Lord, and she goes ahead and decides to kill the children, the fruit of the womb, and then commit suicide and killing herself. Here's another one that's completely disgusting, and I take this one super personal as a result of my background in law enforcement myself. A former Louisiana cop arrested for animal sex abuse and charged with child pornography. Talk about loss of natural affection. Children and animals this individual's having sex with, and he was in law enforcement. Completely disgusting. Here's another prophecy that the Bible talked about. Jesus said in the last days the church would be persecuted. You'd be persecuted for my name's sake. South Carolina church vandalized with submit to God through Islam on Palm Sunday. There's an attack on Christianity going all throughout the world, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and here in our own country, the United States. And once again, we're importing the hatred into our country with other individuals that have a religious and political philosophical belief, bringing that into our country, not through assimilation, but through trying to take over our nation, and in turn, hoping that because we live in such a PC society, that we're going to conform to the whim of those that are coming here to change what our nation is about. Meaning one nation under God, God the triune God, the God of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So it's real interesting how we're actually importing a lot of this stuff into our own country on the premise of political correctness and secularism. Another thing that the Bible talked about was anti-Semitism. There's no doubt we have anti-Semitism growing throughout the world, but once again, we have anti-Semitism happening in our own country, and actually, what's sad to say, even with our own politicians. So here's a congresswoman who was brought here under a refugee act. She was a Somalian, believed in Islam, matter of fact, Sharia law, brought into this country. And basically, instead of assimilating and loving our country, she's spreading anti-Semitism and pushing her form of belief in Sharia law, and she's a representative in our Congress. You know, you take a look at history, look at all the great empires, the great nations that had been established throughout history, and how they all fell. And they all fell for similar reasons: secularism, not believing in the one true God. You know, the nation of Israel was the greatest nation in their time that was built on the foundation of the only one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that nation prospered, and that nation was supposed to be the light of the world, but they even fell. And look at our country. We've been around a little bit more than 200 plus years, and it's only taken that long for us to go in the direction of so many other nations in the past. So we need to have a wake-up call in this nation. We need to have a revival in this country. Those of us that are Christ followers need to get out and be vocal in regards to our faith and belief, and bring people to Christ so we can have a revolution. And a revolution meaning a change of heart, moving away from secularism, away from the flesh, into a relationship with God. So let's get into part 8 of our historical overview and importance of Israel. This particular topic I thought we should just have stand alone, and this is called the origin of Sabbaths. You know, a lot of people wonder, where does the Sabbath come from? What does the Sabbath mean? Why is it that we go to church on Sunday, and is Sunday actually the Sabbath day? Well, when you take a look at all the different religions and faith and such, the true faith and religion of Christianity, and once again, Judaism is really important because it was the foundation of Christianity, that this was established actually through Moses. This goes back all the way through Leviticus 23:2. And God said, "Speak to the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts." In Leviticus 23:3, it says, 6 days ye shall work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day of rest, a holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. But ye shall offer an offering made of fire unto the Lord 7 days, and the seventh day is a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. So basically, this was the establishment of work 6 days, take a day off. Now, it's believed through historical records and through the writings of Moses and other patriarchs that the Sabbath was actually on a Saturday, not on a Sunday, but we celebrate on a Sunday for those of us that are part of the Christian faith. So it really doesn't matter if it's the Saturday or Sunday. What it matters is that you're taking a day and having that day be in relationship with God and resting, because the body does need rest. You know, it's been proven through all sorts of health research that individuals that work 7 days a week, long hours, end up decreasing their life decreasing their health. And those that actually take time off, actually take vacations, rest, are actually going to be a lot healthier. So God saw this as an important issue, that you're to work and then you're supposed to take a day off. And once again, that day off is not only a day off to rest, but also be in relationship with God. No doubt we're supposed to be in relationship with God every day. In Leviticus 23:2, it says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them, When ye be coming into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest." Now, this is really important for two parts. Number one, I wanted to point out here how God is telling Moses that there's going to be a time that the Israelites, the Hebrews, are going to be going into what's known as the Promised Land. It's real important to understand where that Promised Land is at. And that Promised Land is really significant, especially in times, because that's where all the turmoil is taking place right now in the nation of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. So when we talk about God predicting and indicating a covenant with the nation of Israel through Abraham, through Moses, and moving forward in time, they were all promised a specific land that they would end up living in for eternity. Now, obviously, we know through history that Israel was actually torn out of the land, but it wasn't something that was supposed to be permanent. It was something that was supposed to be temporary and predicted. But God said in the final days that they would be coming back into the nation. And that happened in 1948. And then in 1967, in the Six-Day War, the Israelites took the actual city of Jerusalem. And then just last year, the President of the United States actually recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the nation of Israel, which was a huge deal for biblical prophecy. So when we also talk about the first fruits, this is also getting into the issue of tithing. In Leviticus 23:11, "And ye shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you, and the morrow after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it. And ye shall offer that day when ye wave the sheaf an he lamb without blemish of the first year of a burnt offering unto the Lord." Real important here, what is this setting up? This is setting up, once again, Jesus being the actual ultimate unblemished sacrificial Lamb of God. So here's God telling Moses that, look, when you leave Egypt, they were to take the lamb and they were supposed to put the blood on the lampposts to have death pass them by. And then after the Exodus, they were supposed to remember that as a celebration forever. But once again, here's another indication of a prediction, a prophecy of the blood of an unblemished lamb, in this particular time, covering the sins of man, covering the sins of the Israelites. And then once Jesus came, he was the ultimate sacrifice for ultimate forgiveness, the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate unblemished Lamb of God. So it's pretty, once again, amazing when you take a look at the Bible. And we always like to say that the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. In Leviticus 25:1, it says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them, When ye come into the land which I give you, shall the land be kept a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather the fruit." In Leviticus 25:4, it says, "But in the 7th year shall be the Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath of the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow the field nor prune the vineyard." And in verse 5, it says, "That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, and neither gather the grapes of the vine and dress, for it is a year of the rest of the land." So not only is God talking about that humans are supposed to have a day of rest, but he's also saying the land is supposed to have rest. And this is pretty interesting, because when you take a look at where we're at today, the soil and the nutrients in the land throughout the world today has been so over harvest with no rest that anyone that will talk nutrition value will say that the same nutritional value of, let's say, a fruit or a vegetable does not have the same nutritional value as thousands of years ago. And that is as a result of the land continuously being cultivated, continuously being used, and never being able to be replenished. And so here's God saying that, look, in order to have the ultimate in food, the highest quality of food, in order to have the crops come in like they're supposed to, I'm going to state that every 6th year, on the 7th year, that there's a day of rest. And what's real interesting about this would end up being ultimately a prophecy that would come back and bite the Israelites in terms of a punishment. We'll talk about that in a minute. In Leviticus 25:8, it says, "And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years, and to thee 7 times 7 years. And the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be into 49 years. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim throughout all the land and to the inhabitants therefore, it shall be jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man into his possession, and shall return every man into his family." Verse 11 says, "A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth on itself, nor gather the grapes in vineyard of dressed. For it is a jubilee, it shall be holy unto you. You shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In the year of the jubilee you shall not return every man, you shall return every man to his possession." Now what's this? This is once again establishing another type of a Sabbath, but also a jubilee, which basically means the releasing and forgiveness of any type of, let's say, for example, someone owes somebody money, or someone is enslaved to somebody. And slavery in these times is a little bit different in regards to what slavery was going on, for example, in Egypt. It meant that you were owed a debt, and that debt needed to be repaid. And so you worked as, quote unquote, a slave for that individual you need to work for. But on the 50th year, whenever the Jubilee happened, God ordained that all those debts would be released. Anyone owed you anything, it would be released. And if someone was a slave, or someone was indentured into somebody else's home to work off a debt, they would be released. In addition, every man would be returning to their own possessions. So this is an interesting law in itself. Imagine in our country today with credit card companies that, at 50 years, all of a sudden, all of those credit card debts are gone. All your the money that you may owe for whatever it may be is gone. That's basically what this was doing. So when we move forward with this, we kind of learned that God had a plan for this in regards to restoration, which is real interesting in regards to how when restoration occurs, God was going to be having Jesus restore what was lost, with him coming to be the great Redeemer and restore order and restore the earth back into God's hands. As we know, prior to Jesus being crucified on the cross, the actual earth was in the hands of Satan. The deed had been given up as a result of the fall of Adam and Eve, and Jesus had to come and be the great Redeemer to use his blood as a sacrificial lamb to redeem this world, to redeem this earth. And so it's interesting how God has all these different rules and laws that work out throughout history. In Leviticus 25:7, it says, "Ye shall not therefore oppress one another, but thou shalt fear thy God. For I am the Lord God. Wherever ye shall do my statutes and keep my judgments and do them, ye shall dwell in the land safely." Real important to understand this. It says here, "Ye shall do my statutes, keep my judgments, and do them, and ye shall dwell in the land safely." So for those of nations that were established or built on the principles of the one true God, and that nation and its leaders and its people reject God, it's obviously going to be turning out to be the opposite of safety, to where it's going to end up being a judgment. And that's what happened ultimately to the nation of Israel. Now it says here, kind of say, well, gee, during this 7th year, what are we going to eat? Okay, "Behold, we shall not sow nor gather in our increases." And verse 21 says, "Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years." In verse 22, it says, "And ye shall sow the 8th year, and eat of the old fruit until the 9th year. Until her fruits come in, ye shall eat of the old store. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, and ye are strangers." So here we're talking about, once again, people saying, well, gee, if we don't harvest, if we don't gather, if we don't plant in the 7th year, what are we going to eat? Well, so what God's saying is that as a promise and a covenant, if you do as I say to do, I'm going to literally triple your crop in the 6th year. And so this way, for not only the 7th year, but the year following, when you're going to be planting and regrowing, you're going to have enough food, plenty of food, fruits and vegetables, things of the ground, to be able to survive and live. And that's what God did. It's absolutely amazing. But once again, once Israel became a nation, they moved away from God's rules and laws, and they ultimately ended up having all of this come back on them. So in Leviticus 25:38, it says, "I am the Lord your God, which brought forth out of the land of Egypt and gave you the land of Canaan, and to be your God." Real important here. Remember earlier, God said, "I'm going to bring you into a land." Well, that land was the land of Canaan. And understand that this land had nothing to do with what we know about today as what they call the Palestinians. So you'll notice that throughout the Bible, there's nothing in regards to Palestinians when it talks about the land that God promised the nation of Israel. And so right here, it says in this verse, "I'm going to give you the land of Canaan." And once again, God said, that's not your land, it's my land. You're a stranger. I've decided to put you here. I'm going to take out all the people and the tribes that are evil, that worship false gods, that sacrifice their children to fire gods. I'm going to remove them from the land, and you're going to come into this land, and this is going to be your land for eternity. Now, once again, there was all sorts of prophecies talking about how not if they messed up, but when they messed up, they would be taken out of the land, they would be divided, and then one day, in the last days, in the end times, they would come back and become a nation overnight, regain Jerusalem, and then that would be once again in their possession until the end times when the Antichrist comes onto the scene. So it's really important to see how this all plays out. And once again, the truth about history. So when we talk about the Sabbath, and once again, the 6th year that you're supposed to sow and harvest, and the 7th year you're supposed to have the land rest, as we'll find out in future trainings, that there was actually a punishment that God had placed on the nation of Israel. And that punishment ended up being for 490 years as a result of the nation of Israel missing 70 Sabbaths, meaning that there were 70 of those years that they did not recognize that 7th year, and God kept track of that. And they never repented, they never asked for forgiveness, so God held them accountable, and they were ended up punishment as a part of their separation from their land in the 490 years, which is really, really, really critical to understand for future biblical prophecy. So hopefully you got a better understanding of some of the laws, the Sabbath, the Jubilee, the land Sabbath, some of the things that a lot of people don't realize where that came from and what it means. And once again, the significance of it even in today and understanding end time prophecy. So we thank you for visiting our ministry website again. We hope that you'll share our ministry with other people, invite people to come check us out to learn about end time prophecy. And we also would appreciate it if you have an interest in supporting our ministry. So until next time, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you safe and watch over you. And may the Lord shine his countenance upon you. And may the Lord give you strength and encouragement during difficult times. We thank you for your support and thank you for watching this ministry.